Alright, so far in our tutorial series we've only worked with a cube and applying textures to a cube or a box, which is very easy, very straightforward. You have flat surfaces, you don't have any curved surfaces, you have a very defined front, back, left, right, top, and bottom. Well, now let's go ahead and bring up a cylinder, and I'll put the origin at the end so it sits up on the ground level. And let's bring up a cylinder so that we can kind of see the difference in how the program will apply a texture. Actually, let me go part center axis. How the program will apply the texture to a curved part or a curved surface. Okay, so we have our cylinder here. So the first thing we run into with a cylinder is, let me zoom it in here so we can kind of discuss this, is what constitutes the front. Okay, what constitutes the back? What constitutes the left side? What constitutes the right side? In other words, can you define how much of the cylinder is the front? How much of the surface of the cylinder is the back? How much is the left? How much is the right? Top and bottom are obviously easy. You've got your top and bottom defined very easily. That's not an issue. Those can be textured very easily. But when it comes to texturing the sides or the front or the back, the program doesn't necessarily know where to stop that texture at. And let me do a couple examples here of this cylinder to show you. Let me shorten it up a little bit here so it's a little bit easier to work with. In the Y, oh, wrong way. There we go. So it's a little shorter and easier to see here in our example. Let me make it even shorter. There we go. Alright, so the top and the bottom are obviously the flat surfaces here. So I'll texture those first. Those aren't any big deal to texture. So top and the bottom down here. Again, using our tutorial texture file as a sample. I don't know, let me just make the top, let me just use a blank. Let me make it white just so it's easy to see. Top and the bottom. Tutorial, again, every time I come in and select a new surface, I do have to tell it which one of those I want it to use. So, alright, so the top and the bottom. And you can't probably hardly see it. That's probably not a good color selection there, Miguel. Let's try something different. Black should show up nicely, I believe. Black. Let's do the black section here. Alright. And this is just so we can see some contrast in the actual part here when we put the textures on the front or the back. Alright, there we go. So the top and the bottom texture, very easy of a cylinder, no problem. And notice I haven't applied smoothing yet to this cylinder, so it's still kind of squarish, I guess, on the ends. There's no smoothing applied to it just yet. Now, what I'm getting at here is, what if I want to apply a texture to the front surface of the cylinder? So if I want to apply a texture to the front surface of this cylinder, like any part, again, F4, we'll bring it up, and let's just select the front, select tutorial for the front, and let's put on oh, I don't know. Let's put on this concrete part here. This is a sample of concrete that I plucked from another project. We'll go ahead and define that whole piece of concrete. Now think about the cylinder, and I believe from my experience what it's going to try to do is it's going to try to apply this texture across the entire front half of the cylinder, because you can't really say there's a left or a right to the cylinder. It's basically a front half and a back half. So I hit OK. Let's see what happens here. Yeah, that's exactly what it did. It applied the texture. Let me zoom it in here. It applied the texture to the front half of this cylinder. Well, if I go in and texture the back half, that'll complete the cylinder, no problem. But what if I wanted to try to apply the texture to the right side of the cylinder? What do you think it's going to do? So we'll come back in here. We'll just experiment with this a little bit. We'll go right side, tutorial. Bring up our texture properties box. Get the majority of the concrete here, and let's see what happens. Okay, it may affect the front texture of this, it may not. Okay, so what it did is it actually did pick out, it looks like it picked out the, I don't know, the right side of the cylinder and textured it. So what I've got here is a little gap. Okay, a little gap. If I do the left side, it probably should pick out a little bit of the left side to texture that as well. Let me try this. and it should just have a little bit remaining on the back side that it didn't texture. Nope, it looks like it got it all. Okay, so the textures don't line up obviously, but basically I've textured the front and the left and the right, and in that process of doing the front, left, and right, it's done the entire surface of the cylinder. Okay, so this is kind of what I'm getting at, is you can't really define on a cylinder, at least a cylinder part or a cylindrical part, you can't really define hard definition of the front or the back or the left or the right. So if I just want to do the entire length of the cylinder in a texture, I could probably just do left and right or front and back only and not worry about the other two. So if I get rid of my front, I hit clear, come back in here, and you can see it's still holding its definition. Okay, so that's a cylinder. And by the way, let me turn on smoothing. I'll go F2, polygon smoothing, and you can see it looks nice and smooth now. To me, that's one of the coolest features of this program, is the smoothing. Alright, so we have this nice smooth concrete looking cylinder kind of thing here, and all we've done for the cylinder is, instead of going front, back, left, and right, we've just gone left and right. Okay, and if I clear these out here, clear and clear, and I do just the front, oh, it's not going to let me do that. I got to redefine the property. Here we go. And if I just do the front and the back, that should also accomplish the same exact thing as far as covering the entire surface of the cylinder. I know you can't see it in the video, maybe you can, but the actual definition that I originally defined for the front is still in here, which is a nice feature of the program as well. So if I still want to use it, it's still in here. For whatever reason, it tends to remember those even though there was nothing selected. Notice there's nothing right now defined or assigned to the back surface of the cylinder. If I go select, I do select tutorial, and I come back in here to the textures properties box. That original texture is still, that definition is still sitting in there. I guess this one it's not for some reason. I guess we never did the back, but I'll go ahead and put it in there. But sometimes it'll save it there for you. So once again, I just did the front and back of this cylinder, and you can see that it actually went ahead and textured the entire round surface of the cylinder. So with the cylinder part, what I'm getting at is you generally only have to do two sides of the texture, a front and a back, or a left and a right. You could kind of see what happened when I did the front and the left, or the front and the right. I can't remember what it was. It almost got the entire cylinder, but it left a little part that you still had the texture. So when you're working with a cylinder, just keep that in mind, that it's going to take your texture and it's going to stretch it, of course, and it's going to stretch it around the entire half of that cylinder. So use a little different texture here, and we'll just show you how it does that. So we'll use this. We'll use something where we can see how it squishes it. So we'll use these set of 4 hanger doors on the front and the back, and we'll see what it looks like when it squishes that down. Could be quite interesting. So we'll define that, and we'll just take a look at this in the program. Okay. So you can kind of see it's done. Each one has a door, so there's 4, and it's stretched that whole texture definition around the entire front half and the entire back half. So it looks, obviously doesn't look very good. So depending on what texture you're trying to use or texture sample you're trying to use, you'll have to maybe figure out a way to do that makes it look better. So just keep that in mind for a cylinder part. It's going to texture one half of the cylinder with either the front, the back, the left, or the right assignment. Okay. By the way, think about this. What would happen if I came in here to this cylinder, and let me go back to the concrete texture. So I'll just use my undo feature there. What would happen if I stretched this cylinder vertically, or scaled it vertically? What would happen to the texture? Well, it's just going to basically stretch that texture out the entire length of the cylinder. And so sometimes when you apply a texture to a part, you can actually get away with stretching it or scaling it in one direction or the other and not really pay a penalty for as far as how the texture looks on it. So that's something you can use to your advantage as well. And you can squish this guy down as well. And again, it's still going to, whoops, I'm going the wrong way there. It's still going to apply whatever texture you've defined. It's going to apply that to the cylinder. So we can zoom in here and see that it actually does a very nice job of keeping that cylinder the way it's supposed to look. Now notice I have I think I have 8 different sections of the cylinder here, so I can actually come in here to point mode, and I can delete off all but the last section here. Deleting points will remove structure information. Proceed. Yes, I want to proceed. Let me center the axis to the part. Let's go F5 and center the entire part so we can look at it. Hello. In the window here, and again, now that I've centered it, okay, the texture definition hasn't changed. So I've gone in here, I've deleted some parts. I tell you what, let me go back here a second, and let me, instead of deleting half, let me do this. I've got a better way to do this. Let me select for my part assignment. Let me go in here and do these two half textures. 256 will work. Okay. And this will show you another facet of how the texture stays with the part as it was originally assigned until you come back in and try to redefine the texture. 256. Okay, this should give us a nice half and top half and a bottom half. Okay. Let me center this guy up so we can see what I'm about to do. So what happens if I come in here and I split this guy in half? What will happen to the texture? Do you think it'll apply that same tan and white to the bottom half that's remaining, or will it just hold whatever it's got? Okay, so I'm going to split off the top, let's see, 4 sections, I think. 1, 2, 3, 4. It should leave 4. Good. Is that going to leave 4? 1, 2, 3. Yeah. I have to think about these things. So here we go. Let's see what happens. Okay, there's our part. There's our leftover part. Let me go part, center axis to part, center that up so we can see it. And you can see there's just a little bit of the brown there, which is just the way that I applied the texture. It wasn't exactly perfect. But our new part here is now left with just the white portion of the siding. Okay, so sometimes you can use that to your advantage. Now notice here on the ends, where the two ends of the texture meet, it's stretched that siding out quite a bit. It's skewed it quite a bit, and this is an example with using that particular kind of siding sample texture where you kind of get you get a look to the texture that you really don't want. All right, so it's basically held, you know, there's the bottom, the black colored side. It's basically held the texture that we gave to it because we haven't defined a new texture. We haven't gone back in and tried to change it. Now, again, let me get into part mode here. If I go back into the texture definition and hit OK without even changing anything, and I hit OK, it's going to reapply that multicolored texture to it. So hit OK, and there we go. So again, it's holding that original texture definition in its kind of its temporary memory, if you want to call it random access memory, whatever you want to call it. But until I go back in there, so let me undo this, until I go back in there and change something, it's not going to change the look or the result of what you did. In this case, I deleted the top half section of the cylinder. So until I come back in here to part and try to change something, it's not going to do anything. So again, what I'm getting at here is if this is what you want right here with just the white section, and that's what you want to use for your texture, whatever, just leave it. You know, just leave it like that. Don't go back in. Don't try to add any more textures to it. Just leave it like that, and you can go with it like that. Okay. So this, let me undo this again. Let me see if we can look at this whole thing. Let me center it up. Let me see if there's a way that we can make this look a little bit better as far as not having the texture stretched out on the end. So what if we try to texture all 4 sides, front, back, left, and right? And let me just do it with the entire, just do it with the dark brown stuff so it's a little bit easier to see. So I'll come back in here. I'll go 256 again for everything, and just the tan section this time. And let me see if we can fix it so that it looks correctly. Okay, and again, this is an issue in how it applies the texture to the, in this case, to the cylinder, and trying to get it to look right. So if I hit OK, again, you can see it looks pretty good here on the majority of the front half and the back half, but when you get to the sides, again, it's stretching or skewing that texture out so that it doesn't look natural anymore. Well, if I go in here and I do left and right, let's see what it looks like. Let's see if it fixes it at all. It may actually fix it. So this is a case where you don't necessarily have to apply front, back, left, and right, but you may want to apply front, back, left, and right to particular part, however it's shaped. And again, most of your parts are not going to be a perfect cylinder or a perfect square or whatever. Let's see if this fixes it. I have a theory that it will fix it, but I don't quote me on this here. So 256, and we'll see what happens here. Okay, it's better, but it's still not there. It's still not perfect. And again, this is going to be a limitation of a cylinder, and trying to stretch that kind of repeating pattern that repeats itself all the way across the texture sheet, trying to apply that repeating pattern, and it essentially will stretch it to the point where it doesn't look right. So that is a limitation of this cylinder. Now there is a way to fix that, okay, and that does involve copying, pasting, but there's we can do that some other time. We want to move on here and look at some other stuff. So just be aware that if you did run into this, okay, what you could do is you could literally, and oh heck, why don't we do it here? Why don't we just copy the part, and we can start by busting this thing up into its four quadrants. Yes, we could delete that, and we could let's see, we could delete all but that. Just leave us with one quadrant, okay. And let's go part, center, axis to part. Let's see what happens when we go to the texture. Okay, let's see if it tightens it up. It does. It still didn't do it perfectly. Okay, but if I went around, I could get it pretty darn close. If I went paste, and then I just left in this top left quadrant, yes. And again, the texture has already been defined, so I don't have to worry about that. You can kind of see that it's a little bit better, but it's not going to be perfect. Okay, so sometimes, again, in this case, maybe a cylinder, there's just no good way to fix it. If I continue this little exercise here, we add the other two halves. Yes. Delete this guy. Whoops. Delete this guy. Yes. Come back in here. F4. Let's see what it does to it. Yeah, it's going to get it, but you're always going to have some stretching there at the end. So no perfect way to fix a cylinder, that's for sure. But you could always try. So, all right, so that's all the time we're going to spend on looking at cylinders. We're going to move on to some of the other parts here next. But again, if you have any questions, come see us about working with cylinders and textures in cylinders. Thanks.